Welcome back to America's Coach, our podcast where we take regular coaches and turn them into winning coaches. Obviously, my whole life I've been a coach, starting at 15 years old, coaching junior pro basketball, and then moving to elementary school, and then moving to being the youngest head coach in the state of Tennessee at the second largest high school. I was really learning how to inner engineer people using the work of Dr. Stephen Covey, and in those days, Jim Collins, Good to Great, Wayne Dyer, The Power of Intention, building competitive intelligence into people, the body, the mind, the heart, and the spirit. And so many people today are getting coached or are coaches, whether you be a CEO, leader, entrepreneur, and you're like, man, I want to develop my potential being an idea of kinetic energy that is ultimately stored until activated, right? Something comes along and activates that. So I believe, based on number of years, what activates that is a coach. It is an exposure to something. Successful coaches analyze. And coming from the athletic world, we broke down a lot of things. I would watch film typically for 3.5 hours on my opponents. I would then break down our practice sessions where there was a lot of precision. It was down to the second. It was down to the minute. I knew what helped us win. So when it comes to data analysis, I want you to correlate this to your life or your business. I knew that if we gave up less than 8-second shots in a game, if we had less than 14 turnovers, if we stopped the other team 21 times in consecutive stops of 3 consecutive stops per stop, that would basically kill all the momentum they had, right? I didn't care if they scored every fourth possession. I just wanted to stop them 3 times in a row. And I would say 3 stops. We need 3 stops. And so when it comes to data analysis, analyzing people, first thing I notice is that Collins talked about this many years ago. Get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus, put the right people in the right seats. A real simple way, but we don't do that. We don't do that in corporate America. We hire people. Many times they're the wrong people. We don't look at their asset. We don't look at their liability. And we go, hey, you're going to do this. Good luck. Read a book. Go to a seminar. Get better, right? And that's really the wrong way to go about this. And I would see this as a coach. I would go into a company and I'd be like, now, why do we have the person with the worst attitude sitting at the front desk? Why do we have a person that can't sell selling? Why do we have a person that's not that hates mundane tasks creating the contracts? It's like, then I started to get into assessments. We developed our own assessments here at our company through an assessment company that I coach. And I started going, we need to measure these things in people. We need to measure what would make a perfect team. We need to measure assets and liabilities. We need to measure prey drive. And I started looking at the significance of data analysis. Now, this should be obvious if you come from the sports world. It's a game of probability. Winning is a game of probability. If you take a certain set of actions, you drive up the probability of winning. Like, right? If we're in football season, football coaches are sitting there looking at, we ran this play, it worked these times. We ran this play, it didn't work. In the business world, we don't think like that. Leaders don't think like that. They don't think, well, let's run a strategy. Let's test a strategy. Let's recalibrate the strategy if it's not working. So I would get into companies and I would say, well, how do we acquire customers? And people would say to me, well, that's a good question. I'd say, well, what's your number 1 strategy to acquire customers? What's your number 2 strategy to acquire customers? What's your number 3 strategy? What's your number 4? And they go, we don't have 4 strategies. Well, how do we know what's working? How do we not know what's working? Like, how do we pivot? How do we shift gears? So let's go back to when I was a basketball coach. Remember, I told you we won, I think, roughly 74.7% of the time when we stopped the other team 21 times, 7 consecutive increments of 3 stops at a time. That kills all the momentum. Have less than 8 turnovers. Give up less than 14-second shots, right? 75% of the time we win. Get in the business world. It's real simple. You could say, well, make 100 phone calls. But what if you're not any good on the phone? What if you can't explain the value? What if you can't follow up and convert? What if you're not good at conversion? What if your assessment, this is data analysis, says that you're not good at having hard conversations and you can't close a person, right? This morning, I was actually having a conversation with a trainer who trains NBA players. and I'm his coach, but he wants to go deeper with me, and he keeps saying things like, well, I just need to see this work a little bit more, or I need to know for sure. And I said, man, you got to get out of this analytical brain, man. You can't experience a quantum leap just thinking about analytics. You got to analyze, but you got to get into action. We got to but see, a lot of people focus on the means versus the end. Quantum thinking is thinking about the end and getting into movement toward the end. And I'm like, sometimes people overthink analysis. See, if I was coaching a company, it's real simple. I hired you and the graph is going up, it's stagnated, or it's going down. It's ascending, just like an airplane. It's going up. It's plateaued. It's coming down. Everything is measured on a graph. That is data analysis. So when you're going into a company, I was telling somebody just this the other day, your whole goal should be to be a needle mover. And a needle mover is someone who comes in and significantly moves the needle. I was on these guys the other day who I love. They're sales guys, and they're like, hey, we ran these ads and we did this. I said, yeah, but we didn't grow our top line revenue. I think it's great that the ads worked, and I think it's, we put 15 in and we made 85 back. I think that's great. But we started with the baseline here, and if you're really a needle mover, it's like we made $300,000 more last month. We made $1 million more last month because we hired you. Does everybody see that? Like that's how, I'm coaching a guy who was making an offer in his presentations, and he was never done more than $10,000 or $15,000. And then through 1 week of coaching with me, he does $150,000. Guys, that's a 15 times increase by making one $20,000 investment in me to be his coach. That's a needle mover. Okay. You have to think when it comes to how not to lose. It's like, plan not to lose guarantees losing. So the way I develop game plans in businesses is very similar to the way I develop game plans as a basketball coach. I do comparative analysis or competitive analysis. I go out and study my competition. I go, where can I win? I don't want to compete versus Cardone for sales training or Elliott. I don't want to compete versus Milet for this or that. What I want to do is go, where can we win based on our unique past, our unique experiences, our unique skill set? And I landed on packaging concepts for intellectual property, being a former championship coach, knowing how to build winning teams, and I give everything a name: competitive intelligence, activation of prey drive, right? Inner engineering. We make everything a unique process. We give everything a unique name. We give everything a unique name. We make everything a unique process. So what I started doing is I started going, okay, let me study what other people are doing. And I didn't think like this for years. And I go, where can we win? And where we can win is in this little area right here. Is it in authenticity? Is it in connection? Is it in packaging? Is it in past? Is it in this? So a lot of people go out there and they say, well, let me just compete versus everybody else. And for a long time, Grant Cardone says, you don't want to compete. You want to dominate. The truth is, you want to separate. You don't want to dominate your competition. You want to separate yourself from your competition. And a winning coach is kind of part motivator, part psychologist, part strategist, part person that comes in and gets more, and they develop this game plan and they go, this is precisely where we can win. And I don't even want to compete over there, right? There was books written about it, Blue Ocean versus Red Ocean. And Red Ocean is where it's bloody and everybody's competing and everybody's trying to beat each other. Blue Ocean is like, man, I'm going to create my own category over here. It's totally separate from everybody else. So if you're out there and you're a leader and you're a coach, part of coaching is to be a contrarian in some ways and go, okay, this is what everybody else is doing. What do I need to do that's different? Walt Disney walked in and he looked at the other theme parks and he says, I want to build something that's different, better, and more magical. That's how I built the Greatness Factory. Look at the competition. Everybody else is co-working. Nobody's offering coaching. Nobody's exchanging millions of dollars at WeWorks or Regis's or Industrious. I said the Greatness Factory, millions of dollars will be exchanged. There's activation points. There's a theater. There's podcast studios. I went there in my mind before I went there in my body. All things are created twice, first mentally, then physically. This is all strategy. When you see me drawing up strategy, this is what I was working on today. Just dreams. Just Micheal Burt dreams. These are dreams. These are things that will happen because I go there in my mind before I go there in the body. If you knew how much time I spend drawing up on big, thick notepads, like this is where we're going. This is what we're going to do. This is where quantum thinking happens. This is where NBOs live. Next big opportunities, guys. This is all strategy. Guess what it doesn't say on here? I'm going to work harder. I actually wrote this morning, how do I work better and easier and happier versus miserable and grind? Because that's what the world tells you. You got to grind it out. It's going to be miserable. It's going to suck. And then one day you're going to get there. And maybe some of that's true. I don't think it's going to be, you can't be lazy and get there. But I do think there's better ways to get there. And it's not trying harder. It's trying differently. And that's what we're teaching here at America's Coach Podcast. So in this session, we studied how not to lose, strategic game planning, maybe some of the strategy of how I think. When we come back in segment number 3, we're going to get into positioning to influence. And I wrote a book on this called Person of Interest, one of my favorite books that I've ever written. And it is how you become a person of influence, where you are the buyer versus the seller. And you are leading people because they want to be part of what it is you're putting together, and you're a coach that people love to play for. I'm Coach Burt, and you're listening to America's Coach Podcast.